Self-control begins as a quiet force within the mind, an energy shaped by clarity, intention, and the willingness to direct attention toward what truly matters. Discipline emerges not from pressure or force, but from deliberate understanding of who a person chooses to become. The foundation of self-control lies in awareness, the ability to observe thoughts, desires, impulses, and emotions without being dominated by them. This awareness creates space between impulse and action, allowing choice to guide behavior rather than habit or emotion. Mental strength grows through consistent practice as the mind learns to resist distractions, overcome urges, and stay aligned with long-term goals. Every small decision becomes a training ground. Each moment of restraint expands. Inner power, just like muscles grow through resistance, the mind grows through controlled challenge. Self-control is not suppression but redirection, shifting energy from temporary comfort toward meaningful progress. Clarity of purpose strengthens self-control when goals are vague. Discipline weakens when the mind knows why it is striving. Self-control becomes natural. Intention focuses attention, and attention fuels discipline. Goals that are clear, specific, and emotionally meaningful shape behavior. With greater force, understanding the deeper purpose behind each goal creates ongoing motivation and reduces the power of distraction. Structure supports discipline. Environment, habits, and routines shape the mind's daily direction. Self-control is more consistent when the surroundings align with intention. Reducing temptations and designing pathways for success make discipline easier, not harder. Mental strength grows when the environment reinforces effort rather than competes with it. Structure becomes a silent partner in the pursuit of growth. The mind learns through repetition. Each time a disciplined choice is made, neural pathways strengthen, making future discipline easier. Patterns repeated with consistency become identity. Over time, self-control transitions from effort to automatic behavior. Habits form the foundation of long-term mental strength, and habits built intentionally create lives shaped by purpose rather than circumstance. Emotional regulation enhances self-control. Emotions carry energy and power, and unmanaged emotions can derail focus. Mental strength comes from the ability to acknowledge emotion without losing direction. Anger, fear, anxiety, and desire become signals rather than dictators. Self-control allows emotions to be felt and understood while maintaining commitment to long-term goals. Emotional clarity supports mental clarity, and mental clarity strengthens discipline. Distractions lose power when attention is protected. Self-control thrives in environments where the mind is not constantly pulled away by noise, notifications, or internal restlessness. The skill of returning attention to the present moment builds discipline. Thoughts wander naturally, but the act of returning focus strengthens the mental core. The practice of attention builds the foundation for deeper self-control and intentional action. The ability to delay gratification defines mastery of self-control. Choosing long-term reward over short-term comfort builds confidence and internal power. Small acts of patience compound into a powerful sense of control. Over one's life, delayed gratification teaches the mind to value the future as much as the present. Each act of patience becomes a statement of personal strength and integrity. Self-discipline grows through small, consistent wins. Massive change is the result of small steps repeated with determination. Overwhelming goals become achievable when broken into clear, manageable actions. Progress builds momentum, and momentum fuels continued effort. The mind gains confidence through consistency, and confidence strengthens the desire to continue disciplined action. Mental strength develops through challenge. Embracing discomfort builds resilience. Stepping into difficult tasks rather than avoiding them strengthens the mind. Resistance becomes growth. Discomfort becomes training. Adversity becomes opportunity. Every difficult moment becomes a chance to strengthen character. The choice to move forward despite discomfort defines the essence of discipline. Inner dialogue shapes self-control. The voice within can either weaken or strengthen discipline. Positive self-talk builds resilience, while negative self-talk drains energy. Mental strength comes from the ability to speak to oneself with clarity, calmness, and intention. The mind listens to the words repeated often. Identity forms around repeated thought patterns. Rewriting inner dialogue creates space for greater discipline, focus, and determination. Commitment transforms discipline from effort into identity. The moment a decision becomes non-negotiable, the mind aligns automatically. With the chosen direction, commitment removes the need for emotional negotiation. Self-control becomes lighter when decisions are made firmly and revisited. Often, commitment turns discipline from something performed occasionally into something lived fully. Self-awareness deepens mental strength. Understanding personal triggers, recognizing patterns, identifying behaviors that sabotage progress, and learning the roots of impulsive action all contribute to stronger self-control. Awareness brings power. Knowledge of oneself creates the ability to transform oneself. Patterns that once controlled behavior can be rewritten with conscious intention. With these foundations, discipline becomes a tool rather than a burden. Self-control becomes freedom. Mental strength becomes the engine of growth. Through discipline, the mind unlocks a higher level of clarity, purpose, and potential. Self-control deepens when the mind learns to separate desire from decision. Impulses rise like waves, yet discipline teaches stillness, the ability to wait before reacting, reveals strength, and each moment of pause becomes evidence of growth. The space between stimulus and response is where freedom lives. Mental strength expands as this space grows, allowing intention to guide action rather than emotion or habit. When mind and purpose move together, life shifts from reaction to direction. Strengthening self-control requires understanding personal energy patterns. The mind is not equally strong at every moment. Awareness of peak focus times and mental fatigue helps shape routines that maximize discipline. When energy is high, important tasks receive priority. When energy dips, restorative habits support recovery. Self-control is not about constant strain, but about aligning effort with natural rhythms, preserving stamina, and avoiding overwhelm. Boundaries protect discipline. Mental strength increases when lines are drawn around attention, environment, habits, and relationships. Boundaries are not restrictions, but shields that defend growth. Protecting time from unnecessary noise and negative influences preserves clarity and supports long-term goals. Firm boundaries elevate self-respect, and that respect strengthens the ability to maintain disciplined behavior. Boundaries create structure, and structure creates freedom. Motivation ignites effort, but discipline sustains it. External motivation fluctuates, but internal discipline remains steady. Self-control becomes stronger when driven by internal purpose rather than external pressure. Each action taken from inner conviction reinforces identity. The disciplined self becomes a version of oneself that moves with intention, confidence, and consistency, regardless of circumstances or fleeting emotion. Identity shapes behavior. The mind acts in alignment with the identity it believes to be true. Declaring oneself disciplined shifts how decisions are made. Actions begin to follow the expectations created by identity, and the more actions that align with discipline, the stronger that identity becomes. Behavioral change becomes easier when identity is aligned with intention. Identity becomes the anchor that holds self-control steady even through challenge. Focus is the engine of discipline. Scattered attention weakens self-control, while concentrated attention amplifies it. Deep focus is built through practice by returning to the present moment again and again. Each moment of regained focus strengthens mental endurance. Attention becomes a trained force directed with intention rather than drifting without aim. Mastery of attention is mastery of self-control. The environment influences discipline far more than most realize. Surroundings shape behavior without conscious awareness. A cluttered space invites distraction. A chaotic environment invites restlessness. A calm, intentional environment supports clarity and focus. Designing surroundings that support goals makes self-control sustainable. Environment becomes silent guidance, gently nudging actions in the direction of long-term growth. The strategic shaping of one's world is a powerful tool for strengthening discipline. The people around us influence mental strength positively or negatively. Energy is contagious. Discipline strengthens when surrounded by others who prioritize growth. Negativity, inconsistency, and distraction weaken discipline, while support, encouragement, and shared commitment reinforce it. Choosing the right environment includes choosing the right company. Aligned relationships reinforce aligned behavior, and aligned behavior strengthens identity. Momentum carries. Discipline forward, small actions build speed, and that speed builds confidence. The first step is often the hardest, but once movement begins, self-control grows through continued motion. Momentum reduces resistance and creates a rhythm of action. Consistency becomes easier. When the mind feels the weight of progress behind it, progress becomes fuel and fuel becomes discipline. Discipline expands through intention but grows stronger through repetition. Each repeated action becomes easier than the last. Repetition forms patterns, patterns form habits, and habits form identity. A disciplined identity makes disciplined action natural. Self-control transitions from a choice into a characteristic. Discipline becomes woven into behavior, thought, and daily life until it shapes the path of every moment. Self-control strengthens through internal alignment. When thoughts, actions, and goals all move in the same direction, mental friction decreases. Discipline becomes a lighter experience when no part of the mind pulls against. Another internal conflict drains energy, while alignment restores it. Clarity of purpose acts like gravity, pulling every action toward the same objective. Alignment transforms discipline from a struggle into a flow. Managing impulses becomes easier when the mind understands them. Instead of fighting impulses blindly, the disciplined mind observes them, analyzes them, and redirects their energy. Each impulse carries a message, a desire, a fear, or a need. Understanding the message dissolves the impulse's power. Mastering self-control means mastering understanding. Knowing the root of desire weakens its hold and strengthens the ability to act intentionally. Patience strengthens discipline. Progress rarely appears instantly, yet disciplined individuals trust the process even when results come slowly. Mental strength includes the ability to persist through periods of uncertainty, believing in the value of long-term consistency. Patience protects motivation from the disappointment of delayed results and transforms perseverance into a steady, powerful force. Progress built through patience endures longer and grows deeper. Consistency is the ultimate marker of discipline. A single act of self-control begins change, but consistent acts complete it. Habits become identity through the accumulation of small choices repeated intentionally. Discipline matures through the quiet, steady repetition of meaningful action, and these actions compound, creating a life shaped not by impulse, but by direction. Each consistent choice becomes a building block in the structure of long-term success. Self-control grows when comfort is no longer the primary goal. Embracing challenge strengthens the mind. Leaning into effort builds resilience. Choosing discomfort over ease becomes a declaration of intent. Mental strength is earned through these moments where discipline overcomes desire for ease. Discomfort becomes a tool for growth, a reminder that expansion happens at the edge of challenge, and the willingness to step into that edge defines the disciplined path. Mastering self-control requires understanding not only how to act, but how to recover. Mental strength is not an unbroken line of perfect discipline, but a cycle of effort, reflection, adjustment, and renewed commitment. Recovery restores clarity. Reflection strengthens learning. Recommitment renews direction. Discipline becomes sustainable. When the mind understands how to rebuild itself after setbacks, the return is often stronger than the initial attempt because it comes from deeper understanding. Self-control also grows through emotional clarity. Recognizing the emotions behind impulses transforms the ability to control behavior. Anger, frustration, anxiety, boredom, and desire all influence action, yet when recognized they lose dominance. Emotional awareness gives the mind space to choose differently. Emotional maturity strengthens discipline because the emotionally aware mind does not get swept away by temporary states. It remains rooted in long-term vision. Confidence increases self-control. When the mind believes in its ability to act with discipline, behavior follows belief. Each successful moment of restraint builds internal trust. That trust becomes strength, and strength becomes consistency. As the mind grows confident in its ability to manage impulses, it becomes more capable of making disciplined decisions even under pressure. Belief in one's own discipline is a powerful amplifier of actual discipline. Mental toughness grows through the deliberate strengthening of the inner voice. The inner dialogue becomes either a quiet supporter or a destructive critic. and the disciplined mind learns to guide that voice with intention. Mental strength develops when thoughts shift from doubt to direction, from hesitation to clarity, from fear to growth. The internal narrative becomes a tool for focus and stability, shaping actions through steady encouragement rather than self-sabotage. The mind begins to recognize pressure not as danger, but as an invitation to rise. Discipline expands through the strategy of micro-choices. The mind often imagines discipline as grand heroic effort. But lasting self-control is built in moments so small they seem insignificant, choosing to focus for one more minute, choosing to pause before reacting, choosing to remain committed. When it would be easier to quit these micro-choices, create a pattern that eventually forms the disciplined identity. Each tiny decision becomes a vote for the person one is becoming. Micro-choices hold immense power because they accumulate invisibly until results become undeniable. Self-control also strengthens through the understanding of temptation, is not an enemy, but a teacher revealing where weakness lives and where discipline must grow. Each temptation highlights a gap in structure, routine, or mindset. Understanding the root of temptation removes its mystery and reduces its power. The disciplined mind becomes curious rather than reactive, asking what triggered the impulse, what emotion it was tied to, and what need it attempted to fulfill. The more clearly temptation is understood, the easier it becomes to redirect it with intention. Routines form the backbone of disciplined structured systems, remove unnecessary decisions, preserving mental energy for what truly matters. When routines are consistent, actions require less willpower and more automatic flow. Self-control becomes natural. When the mind no longer negotiates basic habits, routines turn discipline into rhythm, and rhythm transforms effort into ease. Routines anchor the day and prevent drift. They shield long-term goals from momentary impulses by guiding attention toward consistency. Mental strength increases through the art of delaying gratification. The ability to wait becomes a powerful skill. The delayed reward becomes sweeter, more meaningful, and more aligned with deeper purpose. Each moment of delayed gratification reinforces the mind's ability to prioritize long-term fulfillment over short-term comfort. Self-control deepens with every moment the mind proves it can delay desire and choose intention. Discipline becomes less about denial and more about intelligent timing. The disciplined mind becomes stronger through clarity. Vague goals weaken self-control because the mind cannot commit to what it cannot define. Clarity sharpens intention, and intention sharpens action. When goals are clear, decisions become easier, distractions lose their appeal, and impulses lose their urgency. Clarity acts like a compass, guiding every choice through direction rather than emotion. A clear mind is a powerful mind, and a powerful mind maintains discipline with greater ease. Self-control grows when resistance is reframed, not as a barrier, but as a signal. Resistance means the mind is expanding into new territory. Discomfort becomes evidence of transformation, and challenge becomes proof of progress. Each moment of resistance becomes an opportunity to strengthen the inner drive. The disciplined mind does not fear resistance. It welcomes it, knowing that the presence of resistance is the doorway to mastery. Mental strength deepens through the practice of self-accountability. Accountability turns intention into action and action into results. The disciplined individual tracks progress, reflects on setbacks, and adjusts with intention. This self-accountability builds maturity and trust between the mind and its purpose. Accountability fuels consistency, and consistency fuels growth. When the mind holds itself responsible, results become inevitable. The ability to stay calm under pressure strengthens self-control. The calm mind thinks clearly, decides wisely, and responds intentionally. Calm does not mean emotionless. It means grounded, stable, rooted in purpose. The calm mind remains centered even when external situations create turbulence. This stability becomes the protective layer around disciplined action, allowing decisions to be made from clarity rather than urgency. Inner calm is a skill cultivated through breath, presence, and awareness. Self-control becomes sustainable when rest is treated as a strategic tool. Mental strength requires restoration. Burnout weakens discipline and muddles clarity. The disciplined individual understands the importance of rest in maintaining long-term consistency. rest renews. Energy sharpens focus and restores emotional balance, making disciplined action easier and more aligned with purpose. Disciplined rest is intentional. Recovery, not escape. Recovery strengthens the ability to push forward with renewed perspective. Self-control grows through conscious attention to triggers. Triggers often lead to impulsive actions, but when understood, they become manageable. Recognizing patterns brings power. Patterns reveal predictable moments, where discipline becomes vulnerable and awareness transforms vulnerability into strength. Triggers lose influence when met with clarity and choice. Intentional awareness dissolves impulsivity and reinforces mental control. The disciplined mind embraces solitude. Solitude becomes the environment where reflection deepens, decisions sharpen, and clarity emerges. In solitude, the noise of the world fades, and the voice of purpose becomes audible. Self-control thrives in quiet moments where intention is renewed. Solitude is not isolation, but refinement, a space to strengthen commitment without distraction, and to reconnect with the deeper reasons behind disciplined effort. Self-mastery expands through emotional regulation. The ability to acknowledge emotions without letting them dictate actions becomes a defining trait of disciplined individuals. Emotions carry information, but they do not carry commands. Emotional awareness allows the mind to respond rather than react. Behavior becomes steady rather than unpredictable. Emotional regulation transforms discipline into a balanced, natural expression of inner stability. The journey of self-control also requires compassion, not softness, but understanding. Perfection is not the goal. Progress is gentle. Self-compassion allows learning without shame, improvement without unnecessary guilt, and growth without self-punishment. Compassion keeps discipline sustainable and prevents burnout. Disciplined individuals understand that setbacks are temporary, and self-respect is essential to recovery. Self-compassion becomes the fuel that keeps long-term discipline alive. The mind strengthens discipline through visualization. Seeing the desired outcome builds familiarity and belief. The imagined experience creates a mental pathway, making disciplined behavior more natural. Visualization programs the mind to move confidently toward goals, turning abstract desires into compelling internal guidance. When the mind can see the destination, discipline becomes easier because the path feels clear. Mental endurance expands through the slow, steady training of attention. The longer the mind practices staying focused, the more endurance it builds. Attention becomes a muscle strengthened through intentional practice. Each moment of regained focus deepens mental strength, clarity, and disciplined focus becomes the anchor that prevents the mind from drifting and the engine that drives long-term progress. Segment 3 sets the stage for deeper exploration into habit rewiring, advanced self-discipline mechanisms, emotional resilience, long-term identity evolution, and the psychology of unstoppable follow-through. Self-control deepens when the mind learns to direct attention toward what truly matters. Distractions constantly pull from every direction, yet discipline teaches the art of choosing focus again and again. The disciplined mind becomes selective, guarding attention as a precious resource. Attention spent wisely becomes growth. Attention scattered becomes drift. Self-mastery means treating attention as energy and choosing with intention where that energy flows. The strengthening of discipline requires the practice of intentional repetition. Habits become stable, not by intensity, but by consistency. Repeated actions carve pathways in the mind, shaping behavior until it becomes natural. Repetition removes friction and makes discipline feel lighter. Each repeated choice reinforces commitment, turning discipline into default mode and turning intention into instinct. The power of repetition lies in its quiet persistence, guiding the mind toward mastery through steady effort. The process of mastering self-control involves understanding internal resistance. Resistance appears when the mind stretches beyond comfort and into growth. It is not a sign of weakness, but a sign of transformation. The disciplined mind interprets resistance as confirmation that progress is happening. Instead of fighting resistance, the mind learns to work with it, to breathe through it, and to use it as a signal of where strength needs to grow. The more familiar resistance becomes, the less intimidating it feels. Discipline becomes smoother as resistance loses its power. A powerful element of self-control is the ability to detach from impulsive emotion. Detachment is not avoidance, it is observation without surrender. It is the quiet moment where the mind steps back and sees emotion without being consumed by it. This detachment creates space, and in that space discipline lives. From that space decisions shift from reactive to intentional. Emotional impulses lose force when observed clearly, and discipline strengthens as the mind gains authority over its own reactions. Self-mastery requires inner structure. Without structure, the mind becomes scattered and susceptible to distraction. Structure provides direction, a rhythm that carries the mind steadily through the day. Structure does not restrict, it liberates by simplifying choices and creating conditions where disciplined behavior becomes natural. The more structured the environment, routine, and mindset, the easier it becomes to maintain long-term discipline. Structure becomes the framework that supports growth. Mental strength increases when the mind practices choosing long-term reward over immediate gratification. Delayed gratification is a cornerstone of self-control, and each moment the mind chooses patience over impulse, it becomes more resilient. The ability to wait shapes powerful character. The decision to prioritize tomorrow over today builds inner confidence and emotional maturity. Delayed gratification transforms discipline from struggle into wisdom. The path of discipline also requires honesty. Honest reflection reveals patterns that need adjustment, goals that need refinement, and habits that need strengthening. The disciplined mind does not hide from truth. It uses truth as a compass. Reflection sharpens self-awareness, and self-awareness strengthens control. Honest evaluation makes progress intentional instead of accidental. Reflection brings clarity, and clarity brings power. Self-control grows stronger through the management of internal dialogue. The voice within becomes either a source of strength or a source of sabotage. Developing a supportive inner narrative transforms the mental environment. Words become fuel. The disciplined mind communicates with itself with clarity, patience, and confidence, replacing doubt with direction and uncertainty with resolve. The internal dialogue becomes the foundation of long-term discipline. Resilience strengthens self-control. Resilience means choosing movement, even when motivation is absent. Resilience is persistence in the absence of immediate reward. Resilience is progress in the presence of challenge and uncertainty. Each resilient action reinforces inner strength, creating a mental toughness that sustains discipline through difficulty. Resilience transforms discipline into endurance, making long-term commitment possible. Mental strength grows through connection between purpose and behavior. When behavior aligns with purpose, discipline becomes meaningful, and meaningful discipline becomes easier to maintain. Purpose acts as the emotional foundation for consistency. When the reason behind action is strong, the mind becomes steady and committed. Clarity of purpose turns discipline into devotion, a deep inner commitment that does not waver with temporary discomfort or external pressure. Self-control deepens through the practice of redefining comfort. The mind naturally seeks ease, but growth exists outside comfort. Understanding this creates a shift. Challenge becomes less threatening, discomfort becomes expected, and effort becomes embraced. The disciplined mind learns to associate discomfort with expansion rather than danger. Discomfort becomes a sign of breaking limits. The more the mind leans into discomfort, the more disciplined it becomes. The shaping of disciplined identity requires consistent alignment between thoughts, actions, and values. Identity becomes the internal compass guiding behavior. Identity shapes how the mind responds to challenge, how decisions are made, and how goals are pursued. When identity aligns with discipline, choices become easier and resolve becomes stronger. A disciplined identity creates a disciplined life. Identity becomes the silent force guiding every moment. Mastering self-control requires emotional endurance. The ability to hold steady in moments of uncertainty is a key element of mental strength. Emotional endurance is built by staying committed even when progress feels slow and results seem distant. Emotional endurance prevents the mind from seeking quick escape or abandoning effort in the face of challenge. It creates the capacity to remain grounded and focused regardless of emotional fluctuations. Self-mastery expands through the cultivation of intentional presence. Presence sharpens awareness, keeps attention grounded, and prevents impulsive action. Presence allows the mind to see choice clearly rather than reacting blindly. Presence transforms each moment into an opportunity for disciplined action. When fully present, the mind becomes a powerful instrument capable of directing energy with precision. Presence is the ultimate amplifier of self-control. Discipline also grows through learning to manage mental fatigue. Fatigue weakens decision-making, weakens focus, and increases vulnerability to impulse. The disciplined mind learns to recognize signs of fatigue and adjust behavior accordingly. Rest becomes strategic. Hydration, movement, breath, and light mental breaks all contribute to restoration. Managing fatigue keeps discipline strong by preventing burnout and protecting long-term consistency. Understanding and managing mental energy becomes essential to mastering self-control. The strengthening of self-control also requires emotional detachment from failure. Failure becomes information rather than identity. Each setback offers insight into where the system can be refined, where habits can be strengthened, and where mindset can be adjusted. Failure loses emotional weight when it becomes part of the process rather than a judgment of character. The disciplined mind remains steady, using failure as fuel, not fear. Failure becomes a stepping stone toward deeper resilience. Self-control grows through mental clarity. Clarity sharpens direction and reduces internal conflict when the mind knows exactly what matters. Every decision becomes easier. Clarity removes noise, simplifies choices, and strengthens purpose, creating a mental environment where discipline feels natural. Clarity transforms discipline from effort into flow. Advanced self-control emerges when the mind learns to rewire automatic responses. Unconscious habits often dictate behavior without awareness. But through intentional repetition and conscious redirection, these patterns can be reshaped. Rewiring begins with awareness, noticing each moment where old habits try to pull the mind backward. Once seen clearly, these patterns lose power. Then new behaviors can be inserted consistently until the brain begins to favor the new pathway. This is the essence of mastery, the mind becoming sculpted by intention rather than impulse. Long-term discipline requires shifting from motivation to identity. Motivation is a spark, but identity is a constant. When discipline is part of who a person believes they are, action becomes natural, self-control becomes instinctive, and consistency becomes effortless. The mind begins to operate from a place of internal alignment, where choices reflect identity, and identity reinforces choices. This loop becomes stronger, with every disciplined action forming a self-reinforcing cycle of growth. Mental strength rises when the mind develops tolerance for discomfort. Discomfort is where expansion happens. Whether physical, mental, or emotional discomfort shows the edges of ability and invites the mind to grow beyond them. Tolerance for discomfort turns challenge into normal experience, and persistence becomes easier. The disciplined mind does not seek the absence of discomfort. It seeks the ability to move through it without hesitation. When discomfort loses its power, discipline becomes unstoppable. Advanced discipline is supported by a system of long-term vision. The mind needs a clear direction to channel its energy. Vision becomes the North Star, guiding decisions and shaping habits. When a strong vision exists, distractions lose significance, temptations lose influence, and challenges become stepping stones. Vision simplifies choices because anything that does not align with the vision naturally falls away. Vision turns discipline into devotion, a steady commitment supported by meaning. Mental endurance grows when the mind practices sustained focus. Sustained focus is not about intensity but duration. It is the ability to stay with a task long after the novelty fades, long after excitement disappears. Enduring focus strengthens the brain like a muscle-building cognitive stamina that supports high-level self-control. Each moment the mind returns to focus, even after drifting, increases mental endurance and deepens discipline. Self-control strengthens through mastery of internal triggers. Triggers arise from stress, fear, expectation, habit, or unresolved emotion, yet once understood, they become manageable. Awareness of triggers allows the mind to anticipate them, prepare for them, and respond with intention instead of impulse. The more familiar triggers become, the less surprising and powerful they feel. Self-mastery means transforming triggers from threats into cues for disciplined action. Mental strength evolves through strategic self-observation. Observing behavior without judgment creates clarity. Judgment closes the mind, but observation opens it, allowing the mind to see patterns with honesty. And objectivity. Observation creates the foundation for improvement. Behavior can only be changed when it is clearly seen. Self-observation transforms confusion into understanding, and understanding into control. Observation becomes the silent teacher guiding the mind toward disciplined action. Discipline deepens through the removal of unnecessary decisions. Decision fatigue weakens self-control and clouds judgment. Simplifying choices strengthens mental energy. Predetermined routines, rituals, and structures reduce the number of decisions the mind must make each day, leaving more energy for what truly matters. The fewer unnecessary choices, the stronger discipline becomes. Simplification is not limitation, it is freedom. The freedom to focus on purpose rather than chaos. Self-control becomes powerful when the mind adopts a long-game mentality. Short-term thinking invites impulsive choices and emotional reactions, while long-term thinking encourages patience, clarity, and resilience. The long game transforms every challenge into part of the journey, every setback into feedback, and every temptation into a test of intention. The long game mindset creates unshakable discipline because it disconnects action from momentary emotion and connects it to lifelong purpose. Mental resilience deepens when the mind practices returning to focus, returning to purpose, returning to discipline, no matter how many times distraction appears or motivation fades. Mastery is found in the return. The return strengthens the pathway of discipline. Each return is proof of commitment, and each return builds identity. The return becomes the essence of progress. Self-control strengthens through learning to redirect impulses rather than suppressing them. Suppression creates internal tension, while redirection transforms energy into action. Impulses carry energy, and that energy can be guided into movement aligned with purpose. The mind becomes skilled at taking impulsive desire and channeling it into meaningful behavior. Turning potential distraction into productive momentum, redirection becomes a powerful form of mental judo, effortless and effective. Mastery emerges when the mind treats discipline as a relationship rather than a task. Discipline must be nurtured, protected, and understood. It is not rigid but adaptive, not harsh, but intentional. A relationship with discipline grows deeper through honesty, patience, and practice over time. Discipline becomes a trusted companion rather than a burden, a supportive presence rather than a demand. This shift transforms the emotional experience of self-control into something calm, grounded, and sustainable. Self-mastery reaches new depth through the integration of stillness. Stillness is the quiet space where clarity forms and intention sharpens. Stillness dissolves mental noise and removes emotional fog, allowing the mind to access deeper wisdom through stillness. The disciplined mind becomes steady even in chaos, grounded even in uncertainty. Stillness becomes the root from which mental strength grows. Mental strength evolves through the skill of choosing response over reaction. Reaction is automatic, but response is intentional. The space between stimulus and response holds enormous power, and the disciplined mind expands that space, creating room for clarity, vision, and purpose. Intentional response becomes the hallmark of self-control, transforming interactions, decisions, and outcomes. Self-control deepens through learning the art of cognitive reframing. Reframing is the ability to reinterpret experience in a way that supports growth. Challenge becomes opportunity, discomfort becomes training, feedback becomes information, obstacles become instruction. Reframing empowers the mind to stay aligned with purpose regardless of external circumstances. Reframing builds resilience and reduces emotional volatility, making discipline easier to sustain. Discipline becomes unbreakable when habits align with identity. When habits reflect who the person believes themselves to be, they become natural instead of forced. The integration of identity and habit creates effortless consistency. Actions no longer feel like tasks, but expressions of self-identity becomes the engine of discipline. Mental clarity strengthens self-control by reducing internal conflict. Conflict drains energy. Clarity restores it when the mind is clear. Choices feel lighter, discipline flows easier, and action becomes more aligned. Mental clarity comes from simplifying priorities, reducing noise, and maintaining focus on what matters. Clarity is the invisible force that amplifies discipline and transforms effort into flow. Relentless consistency is the turning point where self-control transforms from effort into identity. Consistency is not intensity. It is the quiet rhythm of repeated action, the steady commitment to show up again and again, long after the emotional excitement fades. Consistency builds trust within the mind, and that trust becomes strength. Every consistent action reinforces belief that discipline is possible, and that belief fuels further action. Consistency becomes the invisible engine of transformation. High-level discipline requires removing hidden internal barriers. Many barriers are subtle beliefs formed long ago, limiting beliefs that whisper discouragement or self-doubt. These beliefs quietly influence behavior without awareness. Mastering self-control involves shining awareness on these subconscious patterns, questioning them, exploring their origin, and replacing them with aligned, empowering beliefs. When limiting beliefs are cleared, the mind becomes free to act without internal resistance. Discipline becomes lighter, more natural, and deeply aligned. Emotional immunity is another cornerstone of advanced discipline. Emotional immunity does not mean ignoring emotion. It means not being controlled by its external pressure, criticism, judgment, praise, and expectation lose power when the mind becomes steady within itself. Emotional immunity protects focus and preserves personal standards. Even in the presence of chaos, clarity becomes the shield that prevents emotional turbulence from hijacking behavior. Emotional immunity allows disciplined action to continue, regardless of circumstance. Self-governance emerges when the mind learns to lead itself. Self-governance is the internal leadership that guides behavior, thought, and emotion with intention. It is the mind becoming both the architect and the builder of its own life. Self-governance replaces impulsive reaction with deliberate direction. Choices are no longer dictated by habit, but shaped by purpose. This leadership turns discipline into sovereignty, a calm internal authority that determines the direction of every day. Self-control deepens when the mind practices detachment from outcomes. Attachment to outcomes breeds anxiety, urgency, and emotional instability. While detachment brings clarity and flexibility, detachment does not reduce ambition. It refines it by focusing on action rather than stress. Detachment allows the mind to stay present, calm, and effective without being overwhelmed by fear of failure or desire for immediate success. Detachment strengthens discipline because it removes emotional turbulence from the process. Advanced discipline involves mastering the transition between emotional states. Rapid transitions allow the mind to recover quickly from challenge, redirect focus, and regain clarity. Emotional agility prevents emotional spirals and protects productivity. The mind becomes skilled at shifting from frustration to calm, from doubt to determination, from confusion to clarity. This agility makes disciplined action possible. Even when emotions fluctuate, emotional agility becomes one of the strongest forms of mental strength. Self-control grows when the mind internalizes the principle of cause and effect. Every action leads somewhere. Every choice shapes the path ahead. This awareness brings responsibility and empowerment. The mind begins to understand that nothing is random. Outcomes reflect choices, patterns, and habits. Cause and effect thinking strengthens discipline because it reveals the true power of daily behavior. Each small choice becomes meaningful when seen as part of a larger trajectory. The disciplined mind cultivates an unshakable sense of self-direction. Self-direction anchors behavior to internal purpose rather than external influence, opinion, noise. Expectation and pressure lose their pull when the mind stands firmly in its own direction. Self-direction turns discipline into freedom, the freedom to choose the path without being swayed by temporary emotion or the voices of others. Mastery deepens when the mind embraces the idea that discipline is not a temporary effort, but a lifestyle. Discipline becomes a way of moving through the world, a way of thinking, a way of choosing. The mind stops negotiating with itself and begins living in alignment with the identity it has built. Discipline is not something practiced occasionally. It becomes woven into every decision, every thought, and every action. This integration transforms discipline from an external demand into an internal expression of self-respect. Mental strength rises when the mind learns to hold two truths at once, the truth of present effort and the truth of future vision. Holding both creates balance. The present effort anchors action in the now, while the future vision guides long-term purpose. This dual awareness creates mental stability, preventing impatience and discouragement. It builds a disciplined mindset capable of working steadily while maintaining belief in the long game. Self-control advances when the mind develops power over its own story. The story one tells about their strengths, challenges, and possibilities shapes behavior. Rewriting the story rewrites identity, and rewriting identity rewrites destiny. The disciplined mind takes ownership of its story, shaping it intentionally, choosing meaning that supports purpose rather than limiting it. The story becomes fuel for action and alignment. Oh, the deepest level of discipline emerges when the mind no longer relies on feeling ready. Readiness becomes irrelevant, action becomes independent from emotion, discipline becomes a decision made in advance rather than a response to momentary feeling. When readiness is no longer required, consistency becomes inevitable, because action is no longer tied to mood, preference, or motivation. This is one of the highest forms of self-control, acting because it is aligned, not because it feels easy. Mastery grows through the principle of internal leverage. Internal leverage is the ability to use personal strengths, personality tendencies, and natural inclinations to support disciplined behavior instead of fighting against natural patterns. The mind learns to work with them, turning them into advantage. Someone with intense focus uses deep work, someone with high energy uses momentum, someone with structure uses routine, someone with creativity uses vision. Self-control becomes stronger when strengths are used intentionally. Total self-mastery moves the mind into alignment with its highest standards. Internal standards become the measure of behavior, rather than external validation. These standards create structure, consistency, and direction. High standards do not create pressure, they create clarity. When standards are high, the mind naturally makes disciplined choices, because anything less feels misaligned. High standards shape the identity of the individual, and identity shapes the future. Long-term transformation begins when discipline evolves from an action into a lifestyle, a deeply embedded way of living that shapes every choice and every habit. Discipline stops being something practiced at certain moments and becomes the foundation beneath every decision. The mind no longer negotiates with itself about what must be done, it simply follows the identity it has forged. The shift from effort to embodiment marks the beginning of true mastery. Lifestyle discipline is sustained through the power of internal alignment. Alignment means every part of the self pulls in the same direction. Thoughts, actions, habits, decisions, and identity all moving with a shared purpose. When internal alignment is strong, discipline feels smooth, because there is no internal conflict pulling the mind off track. Alignment eliminates friction, and friction is the greatest threat. 2. Consistency. When friction is removed, discipline becomes a natural expression of who the individual is becoming. Deep transformation requires mastering persistence. Persistence is not force, it is a quiet, unwavering commitment to continue, despite obstacles. The persistent mind understands that challenges are temporary, but growth is permanent. Persistence turns setbacks into stepping stones, and delays into lessons. The persistent individual never stops moving forward, even if progress slows. Persistence ensures that discipline survives through difficulty and grows stronger because of it. Emotional discipline deepens when the mind learns to separate emotion from identity. Emotions rise and fall, but identity remains steady. Emotional discipline does not suppress feeling, it simply prevents feeling from dictating behavior. When emotions lose their authority over choices, self-control becomes reliable and stable. Emotional discipline makes it possible to act with clarity, even in moments of uncertainty. Pressure or stress. Emotional discipline turns chaos into focus. The evolution of identity becomes the core of sustained self-control. Identity is the silent architect behind behavior. The mind acts in alignment with who it believes itself to be. When identity shifts, behavior naturally follows, transforming. Identity begins with choosing the qualities the future self embodies: strength, clarity, discipline, resilience, and intention. Then each action becomes a vote for this identity. Identity reshapes habits, and habits reinforce identity, forming a cycle that steadily transforms the inner self. The psychology of becoming unshakable rests on understanding that mental strength grows through challenge. Adversity becomes the training ground for discipline, not a threat, but a sharpening stone. The unshakable mind is built through exposure to difficulty, through facing discomfort and choosing growth again and again. The mind becomes unbreakable, not by avoiding struggle, but by moving through it with purpose. Challenge becomes the catalyst for evolution. Self-control strengthens when the mind learns to redirect emotional energy. Emotions carry intensity, and that intensity can be transformed into forward motion. Frustration can become determination. Fear can become preparation. Doubt can become strategy. sadness can become reflection. Redirecting emotional energy transforms reactive emotion into purposeful action. This ability becomes a defining feature of psychological resilience. Long-term discipline flourishes through the development of personal systems. Systems remove chaos and create consistency. Systems turn discipline from something that relies on willpower into something supported by structure. Well-designed systems make disciplined choices easy, and undisciplined choices less available. Systems create the environment where discipline thrives, because they guide behavior even when motivation is low. Systems support the disciplined identity and keep actions aligned with long-term goals. Advanced self-control requires the mastery of response time. Slowing down the gap between impulse and action creates space for clarity. The longer the gap, the more powerful the self-control. The mind becomes skilled at noticing the rise of emotion, recognizing the impulse, and choosing the response with intention, rather than reacting automatically. This controlled response time becomes a crucial skill that shapes behavior with precision. Mental strength grows when the mind embraces personal ownership. Ownership means recognizing that growth, responsibility, and discipline belong to the individual. External circumstances influence, but do not control the path. Ownership creates empowerment, and empowerment strengthens discipline. Ownership dissolves excuses. Because the mind acknowledges its ability to change its trajectory, ownership transforms discipline into a conscious personal responsibility. Self-mastery intensifies through the cultivation of mental endurance. Mental endurance is the ability to sustain effort over long periods. Without emotional collapse or loss of clarity, endurance is built through steady repetition and continuous return to purpose. The mind strengthens not by avoiding fatigue but by learning to move with it. Maintaining stability even when challenged. Mental endurance creates the capacity to remain consistent long after others would stop. Total discipline emerges when the mind learns to navigate inner conflict instead of being dominated by it. Inner conflict appears when old patterns collide with new identity. The disciplined mind does not resist this conflict. It studies, it understands it, and uses it to guide transformation. Inner conflict reveals the edges of growth, where the mind is being reshaped into something stronger. Navigating this conflict with clarity ensures that discipline evolves alongside identity. Advanced self-control grows when the individual develops structured self-awareness. Self-awareness is the ability to understand internal patterns, motivations, triggers, and tendencies. With clarity, structured self-awareness means observing these patterns consistently and using the information to improve alignment. Self-awareness makes discipline easier because it reveals the real causes behind behavior rather than symptoms. Awareness becomes the guide that leads the mind toward higher levels of mastery. The psychology of unshakable discipline includes building resilience toward uncertainty. Uncertainty is an inevitable part of growth, and the disciplined mind learns to move forward even without full clarity. Uncertainty becomes a space for creativity, strategy, and adaptability. Instead of paralysis, uncertainty becomes possibility. Resilience toward uncertainty transforms fear into action and hesitation into momentum. Self-control matures when the mind embraces simplicity. Complexity drains energy, but simplicity preserves it. Simplifying life routines, decisions, habits, and priorities strengthens discipline because it reduces noise and maintains clarity. Simplicity becomes a form of psychological cleanliness. Clearing space for purpose and focus. Simplicity is the quiet power that makes discipline sustainable. Deep transformation requires patience. Patience builds discipline because it teaches the mind to value long-term gain over short-term gratification. Patience creates the calm necessary for steady action and protects the mind from emotional impulsivity. Patience transforms discipline from strain into wisdom. Patience allows growth to happen at the pace it needs instead of the pace the mind demands. Mastery of self-control reaches its highest expression when discipline becomes both the path and the reward. When the mind no longer sees effort as a burden, but as a natural part of becoming stronger, the journey transforms into a state of quiet power, a steady force that guides every action, every choice, and every habit. Self-control becomes the anchor that keeps the inner world balanced even when circumstances shift or life becomes uncertain. This inner stability becomes the foundation for success, growth, and personal evolution. The final stage of mastery emerges when an individual realizes that discipline is not about perfection, it is about direction, progress, and persistence. Perfection is fragile, but discipline is resilient. Discipline allows space for mistakes. As long as movement continues forward, discipline understands that growth is not linear, but inevitable. When commitment remains unbroken, the mind learns to trust itself, and that trust becomes the fuel that drives long-term change. True self-mastery unfolds in the small, unseen moments, the moments when no one is watching and no recognition is given, yet choices still align with purpose. These quiet decisions accumulate and form the core of mental strength, character, and long-term transformation. Mastery occurs not in a single moment, but through thousands of repeated actions that all whisper the same message: keep going. When self-control becomes integrated into identity, life begins to shift naturally. Goals feel closer, decisions feel lighter, and confidence grows from within. The mind becomes calm, not because challenges disappear, but because inner strength rises to meet them. Discipline becomes a source of freedom rather than restriction: freedom from distractions, freedom from emotional reactivity, freedom from self-sabotage, and freedom from anything that once limited growth. In the end, the journey of self-control is a journey of reclaiming personal power over impulses, power over doubt, power over fear, and power over old habits that once dictated direction. This power is not loud, it is steady and grounded, a power built through patience, focus, clarity, and perseverance, a power that cannot be taken away because it is earned. As this journey closes, one truth rises above all others: the individual who masters self-control masters life. Goals become attainable, relationships become healthier, decisions become clearer, and inner peace becomes possible. Discipline opens doors that talent alone cannot open, and mental strength carries every dream from concept to reality. This is where the path settles into stillness, not because the journey ends, but because a new level of strength has begun. The mind stands taller, the heart beats steadier, and the spirit moves with intention and purpose. Self-control has become the compass guiding each step toward a future defined by clarity, resilience, and unwavering power. And so this closing moment becomes both an ending and a beginning: the end of limitation and the beginning of mastery, the end of scattered intention and the beginning of focused evolution, the rise of a disciplined mind ready to shape its own destiny. This concludes the lessons and reflections from Mastering Self-Control. Unlock your potential through discipline and mental strength. If you found value in this journey, stay with the path, keep growing, and keep rising. Subscribe for more.